Hello and welcome to the Home Assistant Podcast. As usual, I'm joined with my friend Phil. Hey, Phil.
Hey, Jeroen, how you doing?
Good. And today we are joined with Jeroen. How are you, man?
I'm doing good.
Good. This episode is sponsored by Home Assistant Cloud by Navukasa. Easily access your local Home Assistant instance remotely for a small monthly fee that supports the Home Assistant, ESP Home, Z-Wave.js, and a bunch of other projects too. Configuration is done by the user interface, so there's no fiddling with router settings, SSL certificates, or any YAML. All right. Jeroen, welcome to the podcast. Where are you based out of? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your Home Assistant journey. The floor is yours.
Okay. Where should I start? Yeah. So my name is Jeroen. I live in the Netherlands. I'm a software developer / developer advocate at a company providing some API for video and chat. And Home Assistant, I started with that like a couple of years ago. And it's basically something that I'm using to just get insight in how my energy usage in the home is. And the more I'm using it, the more interesting features you start to try out, right? First of all, you start playing around with dashboards, and then at some point you just want to get everything in there. So I might went a little bit overboard with the amount of devices I got in the energy display. I got like 20 or 25 entries in there.
That's awesome.
And as it progresses, you start to automate things in your home as well with like Zigbee devices and Zigbee switches. So you need to get some controller for that. And you try different things. So at some point, we got an AC unit as well. And I wanted to control that in Home Assistant as well. And the vendor implementation that was available was really, really, really bad. But fortunately, there's something you can do with an ESP Home board. Then you start playing around with an e-paper screen. You want that to integrate in some capacity as well. So yeah, it's like all over the place. And also so at some point solar installation gets involved. And in the Netherlands, there are certain situations that it would actually cost you money to inject energy into the grid. But fortunately, I could automate that away as well with Home Assistant. So if my energy price would become negative, my whole solar array, it basically turns off in a nice way for the equipment. And then once it actually is financially worthwhile for me to generate energy again from my roof, then it turns on again. But that's like a couple of times each year that it happens. But I'm in the process of also creating like a script that if that happens, that my AC units will go like full blast.
Yeah.
Because it's just burning energy to make money. It's kind of weird, but it works. And it's just like it's a matter of sense, but it's not something that you could live off. Right. So also done some experiments with Home Assistant to have like a solar supply based car charging, but that's an approach that I stopped pursuing because I went to a dynamic energy rate. And then there's also a feature with my energy provider that if I let them control when my car gets charged, that's actually more worthwhile for me than trying to optimize my own solar consumption. As a day job, I do, as I already mentioned, developer advocacy. So I write a lot of content. Before, I used to do a podcast for iOS developers, App Force One. It's still available online. I organize a conference on the site if I feel like it. So I'm going to do it again this year, November, for iOS developers. And I'm still trying to get somebody who writes like on the Home Assistant app to be a speaker at my event in November. So if somebody's listening and he's involved with the development of the Home Assistant app, please reach out because I can use you. Yeah, and you will get like a trip. You will get a trip to Amsterdam, like flight and hotel expenses paid.
Nice, there you go.
Unless you live in Amsterdam, in which case you can just fly around in a circle.
Of course, yeah, then it's like easy for me, right? Yeah, but it's like I've been involved in software development since 2002, so like over 20 years now, and yeah, I do notice that like the things you can do with software, it's just a lot of fun, and Home Assistant is like one of these platforms and things you can just play around with. And of course, the biggest challenge in this whole journey has been the acceptance factor within the rest of the household. But that's probably a topic that has been discussed over and over already on the Home Assistant podcast. By the way, I live in the Netherlands in a nice city called Apeldoorn with my wife and two kids, a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old. and they're very much into being environmental friendly as well, but they still leave the lights on and the doors open and all that stuff. So it's a bit on what they have discussed on school, like separating out plastic and all that stuff. That's really into their mind share. But if it's like about a light that you can switch off, they don't really think about that. And I must admit, and I must admit, if you have every light bulb in your household converted to an LED one, and then I'm not talking about LED strips, but like the filament LED lights, it's like so cheap to actually run your lights. It's not like a incandescent light bulb that you have like from the early years.
Yeah.
So that's basically, in a nutshell, my journey. So where do you want us to start?
All right, well, episode done. You've given us the TLDR. That's it. Well, I guess so. You said you've been into software development for 20 odd years now. Is Home Assistant your first foray into the smart home, or where did you get started in smart home if it wasn't Home Assistant?
Yeah, I've not done a lot software development wise with smart home stuff. I did some embedded Java development back in the day. That's like over a decade ago. But the thing about Home Assistant is that it's like a very approachable platform for somebody who has like also like a technical developer insight into these things. Because before this, I was playing around a bit with something that's called click on, click out in the Netherlands. So that's like click on, click off, I think, from, well, I don't know what company it is, but it's like it's one protocol that's like based in this 487 megahertz space. Okay. So it's like you can send a signal, but you don't get any feedback. So yeah, you turn on the light, and it's the only way to tell if the light is on is to check whether or not the light is on. Yeah. And you can't see any feedback there. So I basically started with that. So I had a lot of these like small modules in the home to control a few things. And they also have like this home station that allows you to configure a lot of things. And then an uncle of ours who lives in Germany, and he basically mentioned, yeah, you should really try Home Assistant. And it's like, yeah, but this looks like complicated. I have to like install my own stuff on a Raspberry Pi or whatever. But then at some point I just bit the bullet, and it's like, yeah, it's dirt easy to actually get it installed on the Pi if you know how to flash an SD card. And even if you don't know, it's like just follow the guide and you're pretty much done in like 20 minutes. And I started with that on a Pi, with an SD card. Worked really well. Started like automating things. So then, of course, because you have like Home Assistant running, you want to control your lights better. So at that point, I got involved with the whole discussion. Okay, should I use Zigbee? Should I use Z-Wave? Should I use like something Wi-Fi based? I ended up picking Zigbee, and and then things got out of hand, I should say. Because at some point you notice that like every spare time when your family is not home and you find yourself with like a screwdriver in hand and like these modules in your back pocket and like running to the utility cabinet, turning things off and then opening things up and trying to stuff these things in. And so pretty much like the important lights I've got like automated. So one of the things that we have right now is that I did it time based, but now I'm doing it like inclination based. So of the sun. So you could like say like, okay, half an hour before sunset, but I noticed that if I use an inclination, so a number of degrees that the sun is above the horizon, that gives me a better point in time to actually switch on the lights. So in the afternoon / evening, because now it's winter, so we have short days. So quite early in the day, the lights turn on, but I noticed that it's pretty much bang on at that point in time they turn on now. So it's not something that the family needs to think about. At some point, the lights just turn on. And
that's interesting.
And it's not bothering anybody. And of course, I don't turn them off automatically in the evening because, sometimes you have like you're sitting on the couch. You don't want to be like with a remote control in hand, all of a sudden sitting in the dark. So I've got like a nice switch. If you walk out of the room, you press one button and everything goes down. So that's nice. And of course, one of the things that we also have now is that what I call if you're like on an extended stay away from home, like a vacation or anything, we have what I like to call the vacation disco show. Because then the lights turn on, at some point they turn off, and then the lights upstairs turn on, at some point they turn off again. So we actually had neighbors who we came back from a vacation and we spoke to them, and they didn't know that we actually went away for like 2 weeks. So it's like, have you been on a vacation? Yeah, we've been gone for 2 weeks. Yeah, but your lights, they've been going on and off all the time, and it really looked like somebody was home. It was, yeah, well, it's all automated, so that kind of worked really well. And the same for like the porch light. You want that to turn on at some point, but that does turn off at a certain time.
Right.
And just to continue on that, I started with a Pi, had a Raspberry 2 board in there. So that's like one of these small daughter boards that works really well with a Pi on a integration level. But I noticed that the reception of this device was not so great, and there's a number of things that actually interfere with a Zigbee signal, and that's like if you have like a USB port of like the faster kind, if that's active, if you have the Bluetooth chip enabled. So you turn all these things off, and then still the reception wasn't as great as I would have hoped, because one of the things that you initially think like, yeah, okay, so I've got my coordinator, but then my repeaters around my house, they might not be like up to snuff. So what you do, you buy a bunch of these wall plugs that you just like plug in everywhere. I did had the presence to think like, okay, but I do want to buy wall plugs that have like a power metering function as well. So, and I had really good experience with Nook's A1Z plugs. It's just like your typical 2-yard plug, but apparently they're put together quite well. And they're distributed from my house. And if I look at my Zigbee mesh, it's like, I don't know, you start looking at it, you think, oh boy, this thing is going to become self-aware at some point. It looks so complicated. So I had that all installed. So my routers, they were well distributed. So my signals should be good, but there were still devices dropping off all the time. So that's the typical journey people have with Zigbee, I think.
I've had this exact issue. I think I've talked about it on the podcast so many times, right? Like, and the battery devices, the worst. Like they were just
I've got like a couple of these Windows sensors, open, close, and I just gave up on those. They just don't work. They stop after, I don't know, 1 or 2 months. But then at some point I thought, okay, maybe like it's the Raspberry, the coordinator not being as well as it should be. So I switched over to a Sky Connect. I migrated my entire Zigbee network without having to reconnect everything. And the Sky Connect is, of course, the device provided by Nabucasa themselves.
Which has now gone into a new naming convention, which I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah,
but
I don't know. It's the blue thing, indeed.
01.
But I think it's now like dark gray or black, maybe even. But at least I had one of those, and it was a lot better. And of course, I had it like on a cable a little bit away. And then at some point, I looked at the Raspberry Pi and I was like, "Oh man, this SD card, it's not sitting well with me because I was not running like a proper hard drive on attached to the Pi." And I was like, "Yeah, and I want something that has like a very low power consumption." And that was right around the time that the Home Assistant Green was announced.
Yep.
Right. So I bought one of those, backed up my Pi, loaded everything up in the Green. It was a very straightforward process and no problem at all. Everything was working again once I plugged everything over. And that was fine. That ran for like 9 months. And then you have like this gauge in the system settings somewhere that gives you an indication on what the wear on the onboard memory storage is of the device. And that's actually maybe because I'm running backups too often, but that was like going down much faster than I anticipated. And I noticed that the Green is a really nice device to get started, but I was doing more and more on Home Assistant, and it's just not powerful enough. It's the Raspberry Pi 4 that I was running was actually quicker than the Green. So I was like, okay, let's bite the bullet and go for a very old Intel Nook device.
Nice. Yep.
And they have like these VESA mounts in the box. If you ever buy one of these Intel Nooks, the recommendation I have, hang on to this VESA mount because it's very convenient. You can just screw it to a wall somewhere and you can just hook the Nook on top of that. And it just stays very neatly and you can easily take it off again if you need to do some maintenance on it. But I noticed that if you want to get these Nooks secondhand, people, they just chuck out these VESA mounts left and right and they don't have them anymore. So I had to like source a new one from somewhere. But now I'm switched over to the Nook. And that's it has a lot more power, even though it's like, I think it's a 6 or 7 year old computer. And then and that at some point I was reading really good reviews on the SM Lite Zigbee coordinators. So, and then I went with like an SM Lite SLZB06M, and it chose that model specifically because it has the same base chipset as the SkyConnect. So that would mean that I could like straight up migrate everything again without any issues. So that's like the third device that has like the same hostnet address that I have in the drawer here. And that thing works like really well. Got it connected over USB. And once I installed that, everything in my Zigbee mesh got like way more responsive just because it has a few decibels more signal strength. And that was like really the thing that basically gave me the stability on my entire Zigbee network that I wanted. And I like the fact that it's actually a European-based company as well that is producing these. I think it's actually a Ukraine-based company. And it's a really ugly device, like a big long antenna and like this weird black case. But hey, you just stick it under the stairs somewhere in our case, because I have like a platform between the two floors, and everything home automation is like stuck underneath there. So if you walk by it, you don't see anything.
That's hilarious.
So yeah, and then you have like ESP Home to control the AC units. So my wife, she was asking me, "What the hell are you doing?" Because I had like this Mitsubishi Heavy Industries unit for air conditioning, and you have to basically take all the covers off, and you're just looking at the thing. It's like, and she was wondering, "Did you break it?"
Yeah, well, yeah, that's it, right? Like you look at all the electronics, like, oh, if I touch the wrong thing here and I fry it, like that's an expensive thing to fry.
One thing, if you start opening up these things, make sure that the power is off of it, because there's like live wires that you would otherwise be looking at, and if you poke at the wrong thing, you're just lying under your own AC unit electrocuted, and that's something you don't want to have happen.
Absolutely.
But it's actually quite simple. So what I did, there's this forum in the Netherlands, tweakers.net. It's a Dutch forum, so most listeners won't be very much helped with that. But there's a lot of technically interested people on there. And one of the people there, he actually sells these little ESP daughter boards, because you have to have like the ESP module with a little daughter board on top of it to actually be able to communicate correctly with your AC unit. So it's just a package that you get. It does some vampire power from the AC unit, so you don't have to connect any power to it, just one cable. You plug it in the SPI port on the AC unit, and once you have the ESP board flashed correctly, it just works. And now the AC units, I've got two. They're like visible as like climate devices in my home, so you can see all the metrics on that, and you actually get like a lot more insight on what your AC unit is doing. So you can see like at what rate the outside unit is running. You can see everything basically that is like, if you're a bit technically interested, that is interesting of the AC unit. And the one thing that's really hard, because that's just the nature of the device with an air heat pump, you can't really tell how efficient the device is, because it's hard to measure. But you can see, like, I can now exactly see when a defrost is going on, because that's like the bane of every person who does heating in the winter with an AC unit, especially if it's around freezing temperature and like it's a foggy condition outside, because then it's like it ain't no party like a defrost party, right? So we were like just like dealing with that, and so I did like an automation, like if the AC unit goes into defrost, they'll turn up the central heating unit that's like gas based, because otherwise the room temperature was just plummeting so hard. We have like a toasty 22 degrees Celsius in our home. I don't know I don't know how much that is in like this weird Fahrenheit scale, but I know 22 degrees. A lot of people would consider that like elderly home people temperatures.
Yeah, balmy. Yeah, like
yeah, it's like toasty inside if you have it that temperature. But then if the AC unit would go in a defrost, like the temperature would plummet to like 20 or 19 degrees easily. And now it's like there's some lag in there, but at least the central heating system, so the radiators, they heat up, so they keep the heat from plummeting too far for like sometimes even 10, 12 minutes that the defrost lasts.
So I guess that allows you to then have like a way for the house to stay at the right temperature, have the gas as the backup, wait for the electric unit to defrost, be ready, and then let that take over once it's ready.
exactly. So what I do, I usually set the AC unit to. It's a complicated story. What I usually do is I set the AC unit to heat to 20 degrees, but then it actually heats to 22 degrees because what I did with the AC unit, I actually, by integrating this ESP board, I can actually push an outside thermometer value into the AC unit as being the room temperature, but the AC unit has like a 2-degree compensation, because usually what it does, if you don't touch it at all, it has like a room temperature sensor at the top of the device, which of course is way warmer than the actual room temperature. So it has an offset of 2 degrees. You can adjust that, but I like to leave things at factory settings as much as possible. So I just know, set the AC unit at 20, set the room thermostat at 22. And that's what I'm doing right now quite often. It's that because the AC unit, that usually heats up to like 22.2 degrees. So then my gas-based heating system goes like, oh, it's 22 degrees here, so let's do nothing at all. So that works great. But it's actually the same it's the same wall thermostat that is measuring like the room temperature, and that value I also push into the AC unit like every minute. And I also have that like upstairs because I'm sitting in my study right now, and my son has an AC unit across the floor on the other side of the attic floor. Basically, there's some 2 doors in between, so he can use his AC if he wants. But if I want to use the AC unit to actually control the temperature in my room, I can open up the doors. I have a thermostat in this room as well, so I can actually I can choose whether or not with Home Assistant if I push the temperature of this room or his room into the AC unit, so that it actually, if I say, okay, I want to have it like 20 degrees here, I can set it, and then it just controls itself by blowing like hot air across 2 rooms across the floor to the study. So that's another nice thing that you get by just like plugging stuff into your appliances. And it's I have like a very elaborate setup with like the energy dashboard for Home Assistant, because I not only have like the big consumers like a car charger and the AC unit, but I have like the cooktop is in there, the oven, the refrigerator, and I can keep on going. But
how are you monitoring those? Like, have you got like a module behind the power switch to then
different? So like the car charger and the AC unit and what's the third one? The solar array.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they have like their own modules, measuring modules in their utility cabinet. So it's like it's like a 2-unit wide device that you click on a rail and then you have to connect it or get it connected, because I don't want to touch that thing because I'm not qualified to adjust it. It's actually it's actually great advice. The utility cabinet in your home, a lot of people think you can mess around with that yourself. Get a qualified electrician to do that for you, because if you mess that up, it's going to cause you a world of hurt. So just some advice here. It's a fatherly advice, maybe.
Particularly when we're dealing with, like not fake electricity like the Americans have with, 120 volts, right?
It's basically, if you do things wrong there, you can immediately create a fire hazard. If you and it can be stupid things like not torquing the screws in the utility cabinet to the right amount. If you over torque them or under torque them, it can cause sparks and it can cause fire. So get somebody qualified to mess with that. So I have like a few of these metering units in my utility cabinet. I've got like these wall plugs. For instance, the refrigerator, I have like one of these Tuya plugs in between the plug and the wall socket that it's in. So that works quite well. And the cooktop, because it's like connected in quite a weird way, because it's like it actually has like 2 groups on the same phase. So I have like 2 of these. What are they called? I got one over here, I think. It's one of these measuring units, I think they're called. Here they are. There's a Shelly PM Mini. So so they don't have any switching behavior, but they are allowed to take like 16 amps of power, which is great, because that's what awesome. You also have on your electricity groups in the Netherlands. You're allowed to run 16 amps for short durations, like 12 amps for a long duration. And I got 2 of those under my cooktop. And so in my energy utility metering, I see like induction cooker A and induction cooker B, but that's actually the same device. But it's like if you on the cooktop turn on the two modules on the left side of the plate or the two modules on the right side, they take energy from a different wire pair under the cooktop. So it's a combination of like some utility meters, some energy metering wall plugs, and some of these little boxes. And soon there will be a heat pump installed as well. But this heat pump will have like its own metering in there. But I'm going to put it behind my own metering to just see how accurate it is. Because with heat pumps, like a air-water heat pump, what you often see is that they do report on the energy that they're consuming to actually do the to run the refrigeration part of the unit, so like the pump for the condensing unit. But they don't report on the energy that is used for example, the system circulation pump. So that's actually like, depending on what circulation pump you're having, like it's like 10 or 20 watts of power that you're just missing in your measuring. And I would consider that to be a part of the efficiency calculations that you want to do in the unit. So I'm going to be like nasty and put my own metering between that as well, just for the heck of it, because you can do it.
I'm guessing you're using the Home Assistant energy dashboard because you've got so much energy monitoring going on. How is your... Because I know on mine, I've got like the unaccounted bit, like, the grey bit, Home Assistant says, it's, don't know, I know you've used this, but I don't know how unaccounted it is. What's your percentage like? Because mine is like 50% unaccounted for, right? Yours must be like 5% or... No,
it's actually because I don't have any measuring going on my lights. And I know you can do something with like the lights, that you can like do a guesstimate if you know what make and model of light bulbs you have, right?
Yeah, there is the custom component power calc. Like
but I find that's like that's like, I know it feels a bit like sticking your thumb in the wind and just gauging wind speed by that, right? So, but if I look at my energy dashboard, I got it in front of me and I take it for like the month of January, because then we have like a full month of reporting. My total energy consumption from the grid was like close to 1600 kilowatt hours. I was able to inject back like 8.3 because it's wintertime here in the Netherlands. I only had like a solar production of like 63. So if I then look at my energy usage, I've got like the situation of an electric car that we're using quite a lot. Mm-hmm, so it's actually, if I look at this, and I'm actually sharing the screen now. So you see that the car charger is using like a significant amount of energy in my home. So like more than 850 kilowatt hours. And then the AC unit is using like 561. So if you look at our total energy bill, it's basically the car charger and the AC unit. And everything else is just, who cares about that, right? But that's because I can really steer when the EV charging is happening. So I'm mostly focused on that, and everything else is like, of course, I run the dishwasher at night, but that's like comparatively less. That's like 30 kilowatt hours of energy for the entire month. And we're basically running it like every night. But I can see what my car charger is doing, what my AC unit is doing, what my dishwasher is doing, what my washing machine for clothes is doing. What my freezer is doing. And then this is actually one that I'm surprised about, and that's the kettle to boil water. So for tea and stuff, that's actually using more energy each month than, for instance, just cooking food on my induction cooktop.
Do you have a lot of tea and coffee in your house?
Yeah, my wife is like a tea addict, I would say. But it's not crazy. It's like she boils like, I don't know, 3 or 4 kettles of this thing every day. Well, maybe 3, but it's like 1.5 liters of water, and she does use most of the water in the kettle. So we're not like boiling a liter of water for 1 cup, right?
And this is the really good thing about like the energy dashboard in Home Assistant, right? Like it's these surprising things that until you start measuring this stuff, you go, oh, well, hang on, that actually I could get a better kettle, or I could find a different way to boil water.
A very nice example of that is, for instance, an induction cooktop, because people they go like, but that's using like way much energy. It's like, that's going to be a big user in my household. No, it's like when you are like getting like a pot of water to the boiling point, then yes, it's using like 1,000 or maybe 1,500. If you have a really expensive model, maybe even 2,000 watts of power. But once it hits the boiling point, you turn the thing off from like setting 9 to like setting 4 or 5. And setting 9 is going like full force with like 1,500 watts. But if you put it on setting 4, it's, I don't know, it's like 300 watts that it's actually using. So the amount of power that an induction cooktop is using is it has a high peak load that it can generate, but on like 30 or 45-minute cooking session, it's not using all that power at the same time continuously. And for instance, if you have your car charger, that thing is like charging with 10,000 watts of power, like for like 4 or 5 hours at night. And you were asking about how much do I not, how much energy have I not traced in my dashboard? Well, you can see it's like 2 to 3 kilowatt hours of energy each day that I don't have measured on like an average power consumption each day of like, it's hard to take an average, but we have days that we use like 80 kilowatt hours of energy, but that's mostly car charging.
Yep.
But just for reference, because the amount of car usage that we have is not normal in our household, we have a 2-year-old car, and it also already has like over, well, it's close to 110,000 kilometers already. So
Wow,
we're
yeah.
driving way more than 50,000 kilometers a year. So that's like more than 20,000 miles a year that we're driving.
Yeah.
But that has to do with my daughter, because she has to do practice. She trains like 6 times a week, and we have to bring her. And that's just one trip is already an hour drive. So we drive for 2 hours.
Okay.
So that adds up quickly. That's also why we went to an EV, because that's so much cheaper per kilometer, per mile, compared to a petrol-based car. It was basically a no-brainer for us to drive electric. And it also makes that if you look at our total monthly consumption, it's like over half of it is the electric car. And fortunately, that is a load that you can very easily steer within limits, because in the morning the car needs to be full, but you can pick the cheap hours at night or cheap hours in the afternoon. And my utility provider also has this option that you can connect the car charger to their system, and then if they have like a surplus of energy that would otherwise cost them money, they actually enable my car charger if it's connected, and then maybe at the most expensive hour, according to your dynamic rate, all of a sudden the car starts charging for like 20 or 30 minutes. But then you get an extra compensation, and then instead of like paying like 30 or 40 cents per kilowatt hour, all taxes included, you pay like 15 or 17 cents for that same kilowatt hour. So
because I'm guessing like similar like we've got a bit of an over solar problem, right? Like everyone's getting solar panels, and now there's like complaining there's too much energy in the grid, right? And now I think like it sounds like there is the ability now for power companies to say, hey, we've got too much energy, let's turn on some high energy sucking things, right? Like let's turn on everyone's car to charge.
That's one of the things, because I don't know how things work in Australia or the US, but in the European marketplace for electricity, you have like this day ahead market, which basically determines the hourly dynamic rate that you get if you take a dynamic rate contract, because you can of course also have a fixed rate contract, but then it's the risk is more or less on the utility provider. But with a dynamic rate contract, you get like the hourly rates for the next day somewhere around noon, and you can actually respond to that, because so you can actually say like, okay, I want to see how much what are the expensive hours each day, and I want to like respond to that. So I want to make sure that something runs in the cheap hours. But it's not as simple as that, because in the Netherlands we also have like this sort of tax break that we've had for many years, and that basically means that if you take a kilowatt of energy from the grid, you have to pay taxes on that. So we have like an energy tax, and on top of that we have an additional tax that is based on it's the value added tax basically. So that basically if I take that energy now, I pay those taxes. But if I inject a kilowatt of energy into the grid, I get like the value of the kilowatt hour of energy that I'm injecting. I get that. So that's like your base bare market value. if you have a dynamic contract, but I also get back the taxes that I paid in that case. So I would get, instead of like paying 15 cents of taxes when I'm taking, I'm getting 15 cents of taxes when I'm giving. And that is a system that they have in place for like 7 or 8 years, I think now, and they're gonna get rid of it in 2027. So regular consumers in the Netherlands, they're not that busy with it yet. But if you're like into energy and like being energy efficient, and like you have like you have Home Assistant running, for example, it is something that you're very much like thinking about, because what is happening in the Netherlands right now is it's not very worthwhile or effective to run your own home battery.
Right.
Because you can basically look at the grid in the Netherlands as an infinite battery without any loss. So how can any actual battery compete with that? But 2027 and onwards, this infinite battery is all of a sudden gone, and people need to do things because of this system. A lot of people in the Netherlands have like a huge surplus in solar capacity, and right now it's even the case that energy companies, they actually tell their customers, yeah, but you're injecting so much energy into our grid, it's so much of a problem for us. So yes, you are getting some money, or you get like the tax break for your solar energy, but you also need to pay as a rate per kilowatt hour that you inject. And people have this tendency, yeah, I need to pay something, so they consider it to be a fine. So that's like, people, it's like politics and all that stuff happening as well, because I don't want to pay a fine for like injecting energy, right? So people really start to do, in my mind, sometimes stupid things to just not inject energy into the grid. So you have these companies in the Netherlands now that like they call something a solar battery, but it's basically a demand or a supply based electric boiler. So for some reason, people think it's a smart idea to just take energy to throw it into hot water at the COP, a conversion efficiency of 1. And I'm like, yeah, well, it's nice, it's good marketing, but is it the smartest thing for people to do right now? Probably not. They're probably still better off just selling the electricity and just getting their and paying the fee that they have to pay for injecting that. But yeah, so there's a lot happening with that in the Netherlands. So you see plug-in batteries to be a thing all of a sudden in the Netherlands. So I recently installed one for myself as well, just to be able to play around with. Well, you can tell if you're watching the video of this, you can see that my battery is like, it's basically dead right now. It's been dead for like 24 hours because I don't have any solar surplus, because you can imagine I've got like 8 solar panels right now. So at peak, I can produce like 25 to 3,000 watts of energy. But in this time of year, if I get like 1,500 watts, if it's sunny, I'm lucky. And then I compensate the usage of my AC units with just not a very big margin, like a few hundred watts of energy. And I can just like, I can get my I can get my battery charging, but it's like only a little bit every once in a while. But I'm expecting like, when March comes around, we get a little bit more sun, I will get some more energy in it. And I know getting this battery, I will be losing money on the thing, because not only do you have the conversion loss in the battery, because this is an efficient one, it's like 80% efficiency. So any 10 kilowatt hours of energy that you put in, you only get like 8 back, and people forget about that loss. And also you need to like write off the battery itself. And in this case, in this battery, it's like 10 cents per kilowatt hour that I need to like write off on the thing. Assuming that like after like 6,000 cycles, the battery would be completely dead, which is of course not the case, but then at least the economic value is gone of the thing.
Right.
So people think, battery is smart, I can just put it in there. But you have to have a delta between the rate that you're putting the energy in and the rate that you're actually using the energy. And the delta needs to be like enough to compensate the 10 cents and the 20%. So you're looking at like a difference of like 15 to 20 cents between like the lowest rate during the day and the highest rate during the day. And that's not happening a lot in the Netherlands, at least. So usually the delta is like 10 cents if you're lucky. Sometimes it's a crazy day because that's something that they call in Germany Dunkelflaute. And that's basically if it's dark and not windy, so all green sources of energy are gone, and then all the gas based energy providers, they need to spin up, and that's very expensive apparently. So sometimes I have a day that instead of paying like 30 to 35 cents per kilowatt hours, that's a typical rate in the Netherlands. There have been days that I sometimes have to pay like 60 or 80 cents per kilowatt hours for like 1 or 2 hours in the day.
Wow.
And those are days that the battery is like very efficient because the difference between the low point of the day and the high point of the day is big enough.
Yeah.
So any questions so far?
This makes perfect sense. Why? And I think because in the February release they had the plug-in battery component, like a random plug-in battery, was made available in Home Assistant. So yeah, that's cool. There is a lot going on the dashboard.
That's the Home Wizard thing, and that's a very Dutch brand of batteries.
Yep.
And that's also the battery that I'm running. So if you're like a Dutch person and you're running a battery, then you're probably very much aware of Home Assistant and Home Wizard. But the thing with Home Wizard, it's a brand, it's a product, and they have like open API, so you can just take the device and say like, okay, I want this thing to run local only. So, and that's very neat if you're into that. But it also means that they have their plug-in battery as a feature in their Home Assistant extension, and they push that live in like the latest point release. So that's why that was actually in the release notes, because it's a first it's a first tier extension for Home Assistant. They got to that state. But if you're like in the US or Australia or not in the Netherlands or Belgium, then that Home Wish thing is probably not very interesting to you, because they don't sell the thing even in other countries beyond the Netherlands and Belgium.
Yeah.
But it is good to see that that there is more and more mind share. But it's always with like these energy efficiency things, it's always do the maths and just see if it's actually true that it's saving you money, because like the brochure might have all kinds of claims that are amazing. Because one of the things that people are running into right now in the Netherlands is like you have these Chinese brand, it's like Mars Tech, I think it's called. It's like a 5 kilowatt hour battery, and it's like dirt cheap comparatively to the amount of storage that you're getting. But the trick is a plug-in battery is only allowed to, by default, take or supply 800 watts of power. But the inverter that is in this Mars Tech battery is a 2500 watts inverter. So it might look good on paper. Yes, I get like 5 kilowatt hours of power, but the thing is only like in practice, it's only like 60% efficient. So any 10 kilowatt hours of energy you put in it, you only get like 6 back. And that makes like making this thing worth its weight is actually, it'll be very difficult compared to like this battery that this brand has released, like that we just mentioned. Mm-hmm. They have like an inverter in their battery box that is like the maximum rate that they can provide that the inverter can run is 800 watts. So this inverter is running way more often on its most efficient rating more of the time. Because if you have a typical inverter, that's like 1,000 watt that it can do. Usually it's somewhere in the range of like 70 or 80% of its peak capacity. That's usually the range that is like it's at its most efficient. And you can imagine that if you're really below the most efficient part of when this inverter is efficient, then the efficiency drops like way, way, way down. And that's also the thing that you get with solar. If you start storing solar, you get it. I've got like micro inverters under my panels. So it comes off the roof, it's DC current. Then it is converted into AC. Then it gets to my battery. It's converted from AC to DC. Then from the battery to be able to use the energy again, it's converted again from DC to AC. So, and each of these conversions from like direct current to alternating current, that's like a loss of like 5 to 10% that you're looking at. So in my case, I already converted, like if I'm using the energy from my roof in a delayed fashion, I'm guaranteed to lose like 20 to 25, maybe even 30% of what I'm actually getting from my roof before I'm actually using it. So sometimes the maths, if you do them right, it's actually more efficient, more worthwhile to just let it go to the grid, get it injected, and then take it back at a later stage again, because this conversion loss is happening. And people forget about that quite often.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, seems complicated.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm part of this app group in the Netherlands. It's called, if you translate it to English, it's called the Green Nerds.
Right.
big shout out to them, because I'm hoping that they start listening to your podcast, because I'm telling them that I'm going to be a guest. So groene nerds, jongens, set them up. So I basically said, like, green nerds, go, keep it up.
That's it.
And it's very fun, because it's a group of people that are like really into the same thing. It's like the same as like if you're a Home Assistant user group in your local area, because some regions, some cities, they have like your local user group. There's like a bunch of people who are excited about Home Assistant, and I guess that worldwide there are many of these groups around, and you can just have a good discussion, and not like make somebody start to yawn if you start nerding out about Home Assistant. Because I can imagine that if you're at home sitting at the couch talking to your life partner, and you say like, yeah man, this Home Assistant is like freaking cool, look at this dashboard that I created, that he or she will go like, yeah, can we watch some telly now, please?
That's right.
It's very exciting, dear. Just don't bother me with it. Because that's the thing, that if you're into this home automation stuff, that happens quite often. That's the infamous partner adoption curve, right? So I don't like to call it a WAF, because not everybody has a wife. Sometimes it's your spouse. Sometimes we have different kinds of relation models worldwide. But your better half, let's keep it at that. They might not be that interested in what kinds of stunts you try to pull with the home energy automation or Home Assistant even. But they usually just want, if I press a button, the lights turn on, right? Well, imagine what happens if you if you start breaking this mental model. Then usually you get like into issues. So at some point I had like the bed lights automated, and I don't know, I didn't pick the right gear, and this gear had some instability issues. So it happened like once or twice that this light turned on in the middle of the night.
No.
I can tell you that's like really, really bad for the acceptance factor. So we basically have like a directive now in our household: no automation in the bedroom.
That's fair.
So that's fair.
Funny.
So that was one of those cases that you just have to take your losses, say yes, dear, get all the stuff out, and just make sure that you don't mess it up in the same capacity next time that you try to pull a stunt like that, right?
So then, what would you say is your craziest automation that you've been able to put in so far?
That would probably be the solar thing that I experimented with. So what I created was basically a dashboard in Home Assistant that gives me some information about whether or not the sun is out, how much current my household is using, how much current my car charger is using, and how much, if I know how much current is flowing into or out of my house, I can actually see, okay, there's now like 6 amps of power running out of my house. I could put that in my car. Because one thing that you need to know about an AC car charger is that per connected phase that you have in your car charge, so it can be like a single phase or 3-phase one, each phase you need to have like 6 amps of power available in surplus if you want to go full solar. So if you have a car charger that only charges over one phase, you can already start charging full solar from 6 amps of surplus power. And 6 amps, I don't know, because there's different voltages around the world. It depends a bit on what voltage your system is running, but that's to calculate that into watts of power, you just have to multiply the ampere rating to the voltage that you're running. So in the Netherlands, 6 amps times 230, that's like somewhere in the range of like 1400 watts of power. And if you're running a 140 volt system, it's a little bit less. But I have this automation that I enable. If I enable it, I can have my car connected outside, and it will only charge with the surplus of solar energy, provided it is more than 6 amps of power. Because that works. That worked because I specifically got a charging cable that's not a 3-phase cable but a single-phase cable. So physically, I was actually changing my system from a 3-phase charger into a single-phase charger because of the cable. But what I noticed is that if you're charging your car at these low ratings, so that like not at like 14 amps, but at like 6 amps, the amount of conversion loss that you are getting in your car AC to DC converter, because the converter is actually in your car in that case, And that was like the loss was like crazy high, because that's the same discussion again with like batteries and like oversized converters in there. But you were just losing like, I did some calculations. It was like 30 or 40% of energy that was just gone because of the converter running at a low rate. Of course, if you are completely into solar and you're like a super duper nerd, what you need to do is, of course, get your current from your roof in DC, get it into a battery without any conversions, and then also have a DC charger. But that's like really expensive. So,
Yeah.
but what was crazy about this automation is that it responds to any time that the current flowing into my household when that changes, or into or out of my household. So that's like every 5 or 10 seconds. And based on that, it would actually also adjust the amount of current that my car charger is allowed to take. So I can actually, through Home Assistant, I can push a setting to my car charger that limits the amount of current that it's actually taking. And I think that's one of the more crazy ones, because it involves quite a lot of YAML scripting to get it working. And that took a while to get right, but then it was a bit of a bummer, because in the end, it's just because of the conversion loss, it was just something that was not worthwhile. And then I also switched to a dynamic tariff with this system that you can actually charge based on what the utility provider needs you to do, and actually get a bit of compensation for that. And then all of a sudden, if my car is charging at like the most expensive hour of the day, I'm actually cheering, because that means I just get a lot of money for actually doing that. Unless I actually specifically want to charge at that point in time. But usually I want to charge somewhere in the middle of the night when the energy is cheapest.
Rohan, you've got an EV, and I think you've been looking into solar panels. Are you taking notes on all this? Like, you're going to be
kind of, yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's worth it yet here to get solar. Just again, it's also just depending on, like, right now it's starting to get a little better, but it's at the worst of it, your sun goes down at like 2:33 p.m. right? So that's that much less charging hours and stuff like that. I think, again, it's one of those things where I have to properly do the math and figure out, does it make sense, right? To Jeroen's point. So yeah, I love this kind of stuff. Like, I just love the data part of it, and understanding what you're using, how much you're spending, blah blah blah. Where I am, Ontario's now starting to get a little better with solar and like what they're doing with it and stuff like that. Where I am specifically, I don't believe they do anything useful. Like, I don't think I can sell it back, or I'm not sure how that works. I've looked into it, but not a ton. But yeah, I think I wouldn't mind a battery and just from a perspective of having it when there's like a power outage or something like that, right? That would be okay. The solar part is I still have to properly do the math, but I don't know if I'd do it anytime soon. Just, it's not cheap, right? At least not right now.
And the difficulty is like it's so dependent on what regulations and rules and laws are in place depending on where you live. And what I always do with these kinds of things is like I want to have like a fixed duration that I should be able to make it worthwhile. Like so like I want to have like X amount of years, and then it should like pay for itself, so to speak. And that's an agreement I have with my wife. It's like, if it's like pays for itself within 5 years, then it is something we would consider. If it's like longer than 5 years, we don't even think about it. And that's also why this battery that I got installed, I paid it out of my own funds, because like my own pocket money, because my wife and I, because of this agreement that we have, it's not something that we would consider a household spend. Of course, there's a benefit for the household, hopefully, but I just like having a battery in my dashboard on Home Assistant, however small.
Sure.
So usually the discussion that we have, because we're getting like a heat pump installed for heating like in March, and we chose this specific make and model and some subsidies going on in the Netherlands, and because of all that, we can have it pay for itself in like 3 years. And that's like, okay, we're going to do it, because like 2 years ago, it was like, yeah, that's going to take like 8 or 9 years to actually pay for itself, because of other things in our house not being up to snuff yet. And I think that's really helpful to just have some sort of limit in your own mind. If there's like a something you want to spend money on, and it is significant money that you're spending on it, that you agree before you start looking, okay, it needs to do X within a certain time frame, otherwise it's not worthwhile, and that makes it like more or less not an emotional decision that you're making, but more like a math-based decision.
It's almost like a business decision, right? Like,
it's more like a business
viable?
decision. Is it worthwhile? Is it efficient enough?
Yeah.
And if it's not, then just don't do it, because it's then not something for you, right? Because in our case, we had to do all kinds of insulation. We needed to upgrade certain parts of our heating system before a heat pump was actually something worth considering, because the losses were like so high in other areas of our home that with a heat pump that it just couldn't run up against that. So it would be running at full force most of the time, and then it's actually probably using more energy compared to a gas-based heating system.
Yeah, there's a lot of math that needs to go into figuring out what's the kind of best for your situation too, right? It just depends on how you do it. I mean, like our power is relatively expensive, but it's not like Europe expensive, right? Like for you guys,
that's the taxes working for you in the Netherlands.
Yeah, right. It's for us. I mean, in Ontario, it's not the cheapest, right? But it's not. Again, like I said, relatively, you guys definitely have it way worse in like Germany, Netherlands, all of these kind of areas, right? So.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to be a little bit tricky. I want to change it up a little bit. I want to ask about your e-ink display that you have.
I was just going to say, yeah.
Because that, you sent me some notes before the recording, and that really piqued my interest. Like, oh, an e-ink display. Yes, please. Tell me, how is that automated, and how is it helping your life?
That's actually a LilyGo T5 display. I don't know the exact brand of it, but it is basically a small screen, 4.7 inch, I think it is.
Okay.
And it is something that is it's what I basically did. I made a family planner out of it.
Nice.
So what you see, I've shared it on screen now, but what you see is like a small display laying in a plastic box with like a calendar view at the top, and then some scheduled things that is on our family schedule. So it's usually just, in this case, actually, the Schouw heat pump, WP, on the 28th is actually the company coming by to inspect our house to see whether or not the heat pump can actually be installed. And the rest is just some errands and stuff that we need to run. But the thing is, this thing updates every 40 minutes now, and it takes a calendar over CalDev from Apple iCloud. So I have like a calendar on my phone or on my laptop that I can just adjust. And if I put it in there in in the next 40 odd minutes, it should show up on this screen if it is within the date range that is being displayed. Because what it actually does, it takes the current day and it shows events up to like 14 items into the future. And of course, if it goes across a day, then it shows it in a way that it's properly displayed for the next day. I've got all the source code for this available on the GitHub repository. So what it involves, it's a little bit of ESP Home script that runs on the ESP device that is actually behind this. Because I'm not sure if I can have like a screen there, but no, I don't have like the back side of this thing. But it's the nice thing about this LilyGo screen is that it's a screen with a board attached with an integrated ESP32S3 chip. So it's quite a powerful ESP chip that is involved. And I'm running it from a battery as well. So I put it in a picture frame. I can just put it somewhere without having to connect it to a wall plug. So it has a 5,000 milliamp hour of battery, and I'm still trying to optimize the battery usage a little bit. But with the current state that I have it should be able to run for like 3 or 4 weeks without having to be charged. And the LilyGo board actually has a battery charge control chip on it. So you can plug it in. You can plug the board into USB, and it will actually charge the battery that is attached to the board. So that's relatively convenient and straightforward to keep up to date. So you have the ESP bits that actually takes data that is collected by Home Assistant. And on Home Assistant, I have some configuration YAML that actually makes sure that it gets picked up over CalDev. And then in CalDev, it's being put through a Python script. And that massages the data in a way that it's actually much more manageable for the ESP device for display. So it takes the times and the dates and then makes that in a JSON format that is easy to parse on the ESP device. And that's pretty much it. I based it off of some code that somebody else did online before. But the challenge that I have is that his work was based on an ink paper display, which is a reused or refurbished what is it called?
Like a Kindle or something?
Kindle kind of screen that is being reused and then made sure to actually work. So with this code of this person was based on an ink paper 6 display. So I had to convert that to be suitable for the LilyGo screen. And the LilyGo screen was actually a screen that is, it's in different versions available. And the revision that I have is like the version 2.3. And all the code examples that are online are the version 2.2. So it took a little bit of looking on the Home Assistant forum to actually figure out what was the way to actually run this screen. So I thought it worthwhile to just make sure that I take everything together and put it in a GitHub repository for other people to actually be able to play with. So everything is available on GitHub, and you can quite easily take another e-paper device or screen and pretty much do the same thing, or get an e-paper LilyGo T5 and do the same thing. So yeah, if you want to have a picture that you can share in show notes, I can make sure that you get one.
Absolutely. And we'll definitely leave links in the show notes to that GitHub repository as well.
Yeah. And it's not like 100% documented, but I think it's clear enough for people with some notion on how to work with Home Assistant and configuration YAML to get it working. And of course, if people have issues, they can just raise one on GitHub, and I'm hopefully able to respond to that quite quickly.
Nice.
There you go. Yeah. Love it.
Jeroen, thank you so much. I think we've covered off everything you had in your email, so thank you for preparing that for us. But I think if you've given me a bit of food for thought, I'm actually about to go through the whole solar process myself, looking down that rabbit hole. So yeah, you've certainly opened my eyes up to a few things I need to consider as well. So thank you. We'll leave links in the show notes for as much as we can put in for your GitHub repos and all that. But thank you so much for talking to us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, and if people want to find me online, just look for AppForce1, AppForce numeral 1, and we'll put some links in there as well. You can just find me on X and all the other social platforms that are relevant right now. And then if people have questions or they want to know some more details, just feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to reply to a DM.
There you go.
Love it.
Thank you so much.
All right. Perfect. Cheers.